So, hello everyone. Welcome to Earth Central, the podcast of Orbify, where we invite sustainability experts to discuss about sustainability subjects. Today we have with us Luis from Frontierra, and he's here with us to discuss about various topics that we're very, very excited to talk about. So, Luis, if you would like to make an introduction about yourself and what you do in Frontierra and what exactly Frontierra does, it would be great.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me on the podcast. So yes, I am the managing director and co-founder of Frontierra, and we're a environmental geospatial consultancy. Principally, we focus on identifying risks and opportunities relating to nature. And historically, our focus has also been on deforestation monitoring.
Nice. And how did you came up with Frontierra? What was the inspiration behind your company? How all this process started?
I have a background in satellite monitoring, specifically for monitoring forest changes, land use changes, and sustainable agriculture. So I was working in that space for another company for a number of years, and my business partner has a background in sustainable finance, and she was working for a investment bank and identified an opportunity to use the information that I was working with in her industry. So that was how we came together, kind of with the aim to develop insights and use satellite data for sustainable investing.
Nice. And when it comes to sustainability, because this podcast is all about sustainability matters. I would like to know how Frontierra is putting this little effort and impact on sustainability.
Within sustainability, our main focus, I suppose, is sustainable production. So principally sustainable food production. And within that, our focus is certainly deforestation monitoring. But then also more widely, nature-related impacts and dependencies are also very relevant to sustainable food production. So we're looking at things like avoiding conversion of natural ecosystems in the production of food across supply chains, minimizing impacts on nature. So that might be watercourses, protected areas, areas of high biodiversity, and that sort of thing. So within the broad umbrella of sustainability, that's what we're focusing on.
Nice. And how satellite technology is enhancing this ability for your company to be to have this impact on sustainability?
So satellite technology enables us to analyze environmental risks for assets, for the financial institutions we work for, or across the value chain for corporations that can be located anywhere in the world, and we're able to do it right from our. So field visits are obviously important for validation and context, but satellite technology helps us monitor thousands of assets, no matter their size, no matter the remoteness of geographic spread. And it also enables us to efficiently identify, analyze, and quantify environmental risks of large portfolios and value chains, particularly within our area of focus, which is deforestation and nature-related risks and opportunities.
And why you chose to focus more in deforestation and nature risks? What was the idea behind it?
It's always been something that has been particularly close to both myself and the other co-founder. But unfortunately, for quite a while throughout our careers, we never had the opportunity to work in that space. I think it's more of a personal interest, and unfortunately there weren't too many business opportunities. I was lucky enough to be working for a company that won a large UK space agency contract where we were partnering UK space expertise with the relevant government departments in a number of different emerging economies in the tropical world, and it was capacity building of those government departments using UK space expertise. And through that, I got a really good insight into deforestation monitoring, different techniques, rates of deforestation across the world. And I found it fascinating and was inspired to kind of keep on working in that space. So that was what kind of kickstarted it for myself. And that's where I was kind of finally able to bring satellite monitoring into something that personally interested me. And now we've been lucky enough to continue that with Frontierra.
It's so nice, actually. And I would like to know also, because you mentioned before that how satellite data actually have some benefits. I mean, that the field monitoring is still needed, but still satellite data have some major benefits over this. I would like to know, what are these benefits?
As I mentioned, there's the ability to analyze thousands of assets across huge geographic regions, but frequent revisits of satellite imagery, because the satellites are passing, they have a certain revisit time depending on the satellite. That constant monitoring is far more, I guess, you can obtain a lot more information from that constant monitoring rather than having to either stay in the field for months or years, or, do long field trips back and forth. to revisit a certain area. Satellite monitoring is fantastic in that regard. And it also means that changes can be monitored against historic observations, and they can be monitored in some cases in near real time when the revisit is perhaps every week or 2 weeks. Additionally, multispectral analysis can be used to detect changes that are invisible to the naked eye. So multispectral imagery has the ability to detect changes in vegetation health, water stress, land use, those sorts of areas of focus that might otherwise be missed by the naked eye if you're just on the ground.
Very interesting. And I would like to know also, because like in Rubify, we also, we do stuff with satellite data. This is our main way of doing business. And one of the main questions we receive from the clients is about how accurate our data are. Because especially if you're not in the satellite data industry or you don't know, you don't have experience to that, it's like always a question to how you can prove that these data are actually relevant, accurate, and how you can say that this works in the best way. And I would like to know from your experience how you can prove that, or can you prove that satellite data are as accurate as we would like to?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of the satellite-derived data, it's a fantastic first step and it guides further in-depth analysis. So depending on the data that you might be using, so there's always going to be errors of commission, errors of omission. But if we use the example of forest loss data to guide deforestation assessments, that it's a fantastic first step, but then it requires further verification or post-processing to determine what the satellite derived data is telling us, so forest loss, whether that is actually deforestation or whether that might be a crop rotation or some other change in canopy cover, which may not be deforestation. So it's a fantastic initial step for diving a little bit deeper into what's actually happening on the ground.
And how do you overcome this? Like when it comes to Frontierra, how do you actually say to your clients that we can provide that and we can actually be as transparent and as accurate as we can?
We have a number of proprietary post-processing techniques and data processing techniques to dive down and obtain the highest quality results possible. And typically we do use some of these forest loss data sets, be they nationally produced or global coverage data sets, as a first step in a much longer process of verification and processing of the data.
I would like also to know if you can elaborate how you actually use satellite data in the evaluation of sustainable agriculture supply chains.
Sure. So predominantly we use satellite data to provide our clients, so clients that might have a value chain or a supply chain of thousands and thousands of assets. They might be worldwide or they might be across like a large country like Brazil or Australia. So we provide them with a crucial high-level overview of sustainable agricultural practices across the value chain. So if we were looking at deforestation, as I mentioned before, we make use of various different data sources. So some of the global indicators, but also the data that's being produced by reputable national institutions. So that might be INPE in Brazil or EUDR in Colombia. As this higher quality locally produced data has undergone a more refined review process. So using these different data sources, we're scanning an entire value chain and then enabling our clients to focus on, to mitigate risks and approach, or then spend resources on a much smaller subset of their value chain. So we're kind of looking at risks at a high level and then enabling them to focus down on, we might have gone from a supply chain of 10,000 farms and we've given them a subset of 250 where we've identified potential risks. And then rather than spending resources investigating every single one of the 10,000 farms, they're able to spend their resources on a much smaller subset, just 250. And it represents a much more efficient way to approach sustainable agricultural assessments.
And by going through in your website, we see a lot of communication from your side about TNFD. And I would like to know, because I'm sure that many people in the audience maybe are not aware about this TNFD and what it does, I would like to know how Frontierra is working with TNFD and what exactly it is.
Yeah, of course. So TNFD is an international initiative aimed at creating a framework for organizations to report and act on nature-related risks and opportunities. It was launched in 2021 and follows the same trajectory of the Taskforce for Climate-related Financial Disclosures. So the Taskforce for Climate-related Financial Disclosures wasn't mandatory initially. It was voluntary, much like TNFD is now. And that has since been taken up by various different governments and made mandatory. So now climate-related financial disclosures are mandatory. The TNFD was brought about with the goal of addressing growing concerns over biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation, which pose significant financial risks to businesses. So the TNFD's mission is to develop a global market-driven framework for businesses and financial institutions to better understand and manage their dependencies and impacts on nature. And that's because there is such an intricate link between business and nature. So both a reliance upon and a shared responsibility to protect and maintain nature in the interface between business operations and nature, which are probably most easily understood in perhaps like a farm which utilizes rain-fed water. The ultimate goal is to incorporate nature-related risks into decision-making processes, so that therefore making it easier for companies to assess their exposure and then take necessary action to mitigate risks and capitalize on opportunities. So the TNFD, when it was announced, we were reading through the framework, I suppose it's called, and reading through all of the details. And it kind of occurred to us that the work that we'd been doing previously, which was principally focused on deforestation, but through our deforestation assessments, we were providing insights on general environmental risks. It was the work that we were doing was almost exactly like what the TNFD had specified. So we were very pleased to see its announcement, and we were already in quite a good position to provide services to enable reporting against the TNFD. So we're very pleased with its announcement and subsequent interest from the businesses and financial institutions.
How started then? Because then how did you got involved?
So there was an opportunity to provide technical expertise to a set of TNFD pilot projects with financial institutions in Latin America. And it was run by Global Canopy, a British NGO. And we were selected to provide technical expertise for financial institutions, one in Colombia and one in Brazil. And through that, we worked through a TNFD pilot project with the two financial institutions. And in the process of doing so, we recognized an opportunity to develop some automation and streamline some of our analysis into kind of an automated service, which eventually aligned with what we're now using the Orbify platform to do.
What is the main lesson you got to know by integrating and by working with TNFD?
I guess the main lesson was that working in this space, you can get a little bit dejected and think that maybe businesses don't care about nature and the environment. But the good news was that working through this, businesses are certainly taking an interest in their impacts and dependencies on nature. And there is definitely a growing movement towards minimizing impacts, understanding those impacts and then minimizing them. So that was the whole movement is fantastic. We're really, really pleased with the developments of TNFD and the increased uptake in nature-related assessments. And I think I might have mentioned before, but given it's expected to follow the TCFD, when it eventually becomes mandatory, that's really going to ramp up global interest in nature assessments and the understanding of the impacts of business on nature as well.
And what are the challenges?
Challenges, we haven't had too many challenges, thankfully, when it comes to implementing TNFD. Some of the wording, when reports are being developed, there's a little bit of kind of back and forth with some of the wording, because obviously one needs to be a little bit careful with how you describe risks in particular. And certainly we can discuss nature positive later, but nature positive is a component of TNFD, and that certainly facilitates some of the trickier conversations around nature-related risks, because we can balance that out with nature-related opportunities such as nature-positive actions. Typically, though, when it comes to implementing TNFD, our clients are usually surprised to learn that they already have a lot of the mechanisms in place. They might just be named differently. Typically, a lot of the mechanisms relating to climate can then just be kind of adjusted and expanded to incorporate nature in their decision-making. But there certainly still remains a lack of legislative push, and until TNFD is made mandatory, I think we'll remain working with very forward-thinking actors in both the financial sector and corporates until there's a regulatory requirement for nature reporting. But for the moment, it's really good to be working with these forward-thinking companies and organizations.
But do you have any timeline, or do you expect somehow when this is going to be more regulated?
Or that's personally, I couldn't say. No, I don't think it's known. Certainly the sooner the better, but I wouldn't know.
I mean, it's very hard to predict the regulations. And by talking about regulations, I'm going to jump in a different topic, because another part of Frontierra, of course, you focus on deforestation, which is like a huge part, but also deforestation, for me, in my mind, especially right now with the recent news, it goes on EUDR and the recent the deforestation regulation from European Union. And by noticing your website, I see that you also do some work there. And I would like to know what exactly do you do when it comes to EUDR?
Yeah, with EUDR, we offer a compliance service, and our service typically involves a number of different steps. So preparation and readiness of the plot data, so the location of the farms or the areas where the products are being produced. We see a lot of issues with data quality, and we have a QA/QC process that we can use to take various different data files in whatever different format and ensure that it's suitable for deforestation monitoring in line with EUDR. We then obviously do the deforestation and degradation assessment, prepare the due diligence statements. Component of our service is to establish a geospatial database, so a database for our client upon which they then undertake annual monitoring. So our service is, it's a complete EUDR service. We are also working with some clients to help them map their farms, but that is a key challenge for a lot of the clients that we have and a lot of the people that we're talking to, is mapping the supply chain or mapping the plots themselves, particularly in remote areas such as some of the discussions we've been having recently are in South America and Central America, and reaching very, very remote producers to map their plots is really difficult. Particularly, it might be the rainy season, so it might be hard to get there, or the farmers themselves may not have the kind of technological capabilities of using a smartphone or of using a GPS unit or an application to capture their own plot data. And then you even have challenges where remote farmers, they're just producing their crop. They're not really interacting with kind of perhaps specialists from the city who might come and help them map their plots. So then there's kind of like a education piece around, why is this person here? Why are they walking around the farm? So that's certainly a key challenge that we're helping some clients work through at the moment.
And I mean, this kind of like a bit broader from the topic we discussed right now, but I would like to know what is your opinion about the proposed change of the transition time, of the transitional like deadline we have right now, because like it happened like 15 days before, in the early of October, this proposal, and I would like to know how this affects you, how it affects your business, how it affects also some suppliers that you may work with, and how you see this proposal.
Certainly, I think it's a little bit of a shame that it'll be delayed by a year. However, I do think it is. There's so many companies that would not be prepared at all, and it would be there'd be a manic rush to get things done, and I think there would be a lot of problems that would be faced with everyone rushing to get ready by the deadline. So it is a shame, because I think it needs to, when you put a legislation in place, it should be set and they should stick to their guns to, enable market change. But it certainly would have been a bit of a mess to kind of push everything through at the last minute, because it doesn't seem like the majority of companies are sufficiently prepared. So it gives us more time to refine and improve and kind of develop extra features within our process, which is great. And it gives the companies that will be affected by the legislation more time to get themselves ready as well. So it's not all bad, but it is still a little bit of a shame.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same page with you, that is also going to be beneficial for companies that are getting already compliant, because then at the end of the next year, it's going to be way easier for them to have the competitive advantage and not rush everything last minute as it happens right now. But I was talking also with a client, like a person we have in Orbify, and I heard like something so nice, how this legislation, this postponation of the compliance is going to actually show the leaders on sustainability in a way. Companies who are not compliant, they're going to be marked as the people who actually care more about the forest and deforestation and degradation, which is a huge part of the whole sustainability. So I really believe that it's going to be beneficial for them, although I'm sure that many people, including us, were not, over the moon with this like change of the transition time, but still I think it's not going to be as bad as we see it right now. However, it's not approved yet, so this is also important to say, because until it's approved, you never know how much time it may take them, but I'm very curious to see how it's going to go.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I think that companies that already have systems in place or are about to implement systems and are not kind of delaying due to this potential delay in the legislation, they will be at a huge advantage, because not only will they be ready for EUDR, but they'll be able to kind of take advantage of all the other opportunities that are presented when you have a fully traceable supply chain. So much more broadly than just understanding deforestation, there are significant business benefits to understanding your supply chain when it comes to interfaces with nature, location itself, climate. Yeah, it's very broad reaching, these advantages.
And how, like, because you have this experience with deforestation, how you can see deforestation evolving because of EUDR and, everybody actually pushing themselves to have better technology about deforestation? Do you think it's going to get in a better place, or how do you envision that?
My prediction is that there'll be a greater emphasis on standardizing data sets used for compliance. So data sets, when I say data sets, I mean like forest cover data and deforestation data. But it does remain to be a huge challenge. As with anything, when we talk EUDR, there'll be very real effects on smallholder farmers. And that's something that we try and keep in mind when we are doing our EUDR assessments, is that the complete reliance on the automated data can have very real effects on smallholder farmers. So I would hope that any major evolution in satellite technology will come about within the kind of open source realm of providers. So data such as that provided by the European Space Agency, as that will have the greatest impact on the entire agricultural system that will be affected by EUDR. So that's kind of, I guess, my hope and prediction.
And I was talking with another person lately about the UDR, and I heard a very important point when it comes to small stakeholders, and I would really like to know your opinion, because kind of mixing stakeholders with deforestation and also satellite data, how UDR can actually prove the data security of these stakeholders. Because to be compliant, you really have to actually put a lot of data there that maybe some of them are very confidential, and especially when you want to verify with third parties. But I would like to know from your side, as someone who has experience with satellite data, how can protect in a way the small stakeholders that they don't want to be, to share all the data.
We use identification codes so that we can have our client maintains the confidential data in their systems, and then there's just an identification code which is kind of like a bridge between the EUDR compliance service. So that to an extent protects any confidential data that's held by or that might be shared with the EU Commission. Communicating that and explaining that to smallholder farmers is still a challenge, and I think they will still be very apprehensive about sharing their information even with the buyer. So yeah, there's a large education piece required around EUDR, and I think that might be sometimes overlooked. Like how can the legislation be communicated to smallholder farmers who might be operating in remote areas and have limited accessibility to technology? How can that be explained to them? How can their concerns be addressed? And how can we ensure that they're not cut out of the supply chain with produce delivered to the EU market? So yeah, it's a massive challenge. Not only data protection, but I guess protection of their business, the sale of their products.
I would like to know, how do you think UDR may affect that part of small stakeholders when it comes to agriculture?
Well, I think it's important for the companies that are importing products to the EU and the companies that are doing the EUDR compliance to, when I say the company, so our clients essentially, to be prepared to invest additional resources in supporting smallholder producers within their supply chain. So typically, if you imagine a smallholder cocoa farmer in a remote area of Peru, and you compare them to a much larger, they might be operating an agroforestry system compared to a monoculture crop, Salvador, for example. A large monoculture farm is much easier to map. It's much easier to provide compliance for. The resources are much lower than analysing first getting the data of a remote farmer in Peru. Analysing for deforestation in an agroforestry system is also kind of more difficult than a monoculture crop. So there are increased requirements on monitoring smallholder farmers, particularly when they're in remote areas or operating agroforestry systems, which should be encouraged. Obviously, there's very well-known benefits to agroforestry systems, and that's where we want the world to kind of go towards. But those additional challenges place extra burden on smallholder farmers when it comes to monitoring for EUDR. Our clients need to be prepared to invest those resources into ensuring that smallholder farmers are kind of still able to export to the EU.
Okay, and then I would like also to talk about, a bit of the future, because this is a part of my probably favorite part on the podcast, even though it's just predictions, but still it's very interesting to see how people feel about that. How do you feel about real-time satellite technology? Because we hear that a lot. It's a hot topic when it comes to satellite data, and I would like to know: do you think this is going to be reality in the future, or if it's going to be reality, it's going to be affordable for everyone to have that, or easy accessible for everyone?
Yeah, I'm not sure when, but I certainly think at some stage in the future, real-time monitoring will become a reality. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be affordable nor accessible to everyone. I would love for it to be, but I imagine that's going to be a commercial offering to begin with, and perhaps eventually it'll trickle down to open source. But certainly that has a massive impact the different industries that we work with. So if you take, for example, a bank that takes very seriously any deforestation, if they have access to real-time changes within their value chain, like an automated alert system, for example, for deforestation, they can not only immediately identify where it's occurring and either take whatever action they deem necessary, but they can also prevent more deforestation from occurring because you're kind of viewing it the same day, for example. So some of with say monthly or fortnightly revisits, there's obviously a delay between what we're observing and what's happening on the ground, and that delay means that more environmental damage can occur, unfortunately. So yeah, real-time monitoring would be a real game changer particularly for deforestation monitoring.
Interesting. And when it comes to satellite data, can you see any other areas that in the future they may actually need more satellite data? Do you see any industries that now they're popping up more and more the current years?
I wouldn't say it's entirely new, but applications for water is where I see kind of the next big focus area.
What kind of applications for water?
Water use. So water use by capturing water in dams, like the utilization of groundwater. There'll need to be a lot of kind of improvements, satellite technology to kind of really bring it forwards and enable accurate assessments and analysis. But that's certainly where I see the next big, like if we consider deforestation a global focus right now, I think water monitoring with satellite data will be something that we could expect to see in the near future.
And before I close, we have this kind of small tradition on Orbify podcast to every time we have a guest, we would like to have an inspirational kind of quote that our guest speaker is like kind of have in their mind, and something that also is for you, that every time you want to have some more motivation, you can come back to this podcast and hear this out. So what you may have in mind?
So our co-founder gave a presentation at New York Climate Week last year, and her opening statement was a quote from a friend of hers, which was that climate change is the gateway drug to environmental issues. So we would like to welcome everyone on their environmental addiction journey by deep diving into biodiversity, nature-related issues, and deforestation monitoring. So what we mean by that is there's been a lot of focus on climate change historically, and businesses have been fantastic in uptaking or reporting against risks relating to climate change. And now what we're seeing with not only with TNFD, but also EUDR, is that nature and impacts and opportunities relating to nature and the environment is the next big focus area. And we're really pleased to see the kind of growing importance placed on these issues by businesses and governments. And it's fantastic for a world that certainly needs a lot more care and a lot more understanding of the fact that nature needs greater protection and needs investment.
Right. I think that's a very great way to put it out there. It's like it's gonna stick to our minds, and obviously our audience also is gonna remember that. And I would like also to know if you can share some information about yourself and about Frontierra, how the audience can find you, if you're gonna participate to any other events that somebody can actually join you there, or if you can share some more details in general about your contact.
Yep. Yeah. Lewis Rattray, Lewis. I'm on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find our business on LinkedIn and also on our website, frontierra.org. We will be at COP16 in Cali in Colombia, and I'll be presenting on a panel there. And I believe my business partner will also be presenting on a panel or two.
Of course, I'm going to also write down your contact information on every platform that this podcast is going to be live. I would really like to thank you for being here and for sharing with us all the insights that you had. It's very nice, and I think the audience is really going to enjoy it also. So thank you for joining us.